Hi, this is Don Workman.
Morning, Don. This is Emily Young. I'm covering today's meeting for Sheridan.
Hi.
Good morning. Hey, Emily.
Morning. Hey, Scott.
So I'm the Board of Governors liaison.
Good morning, Matt.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I think we'll give it just another minute or two. We'll make sure everyone's in. I appreciate you all making it out this morning to our fall virtual meeting. We're going to have a few words here in a moment from some candidates for Florida Bar President, President-elect, and we'll get going here in just 1 second. Emily, I'm sorry, did you get that email I just sent you, just as a backup for our presenters PowerPoint? It should be coming through in just a moment.
Yep, Matthew, I've got the PowerPoint, so we should be all good.
Perfect. Okay, are we good to go, Emily? Do we have everything up and running?
We do. There's a couple more people joining.
Okay, give it another minute here.
It's slowed down, so whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone again for joining us for our fall virtual conference of the Eminent Domain Committee meeting. Eventually, I hope to be resuming this in person. We had some expectations that perhaps for fall we could resume in-person meetings, but the Florida Bar decided that it would be better to keep this one virtual. So hopefully sometime in the spring, but we'll keep you guys posted on that. But nonetheless, I appreciate you guys coming out. I think we're going to have a good meeting today. We're going to be hearing a little bit from Brad Thoburn of FDOT, who's going to be presenting on the Florida Transportation Plan update and implementation, SIS policy plan, and then the impacts of the federal infrastructure bill here in Florida. All very relevant things for us in the eminent domain profession. Before we jump into that, though, I know we have two individuals who would like to speak to us. They are running candidates for President of Florida Bar. I believe the first individual I see here is Mr. Scott Westheimer, if I pronounced that correctly. And then the second will be Lorna Brown Burton. So Scott, I'll let you go ahead and jump in and introduce yourself and have a few minutes, and then Lorna will turn it over to you as soon as Scott finishes.
Great. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me here today. Good morning. My name is Scott Westheimer. I'm a trial lawyer in Sarasota, Florida. I've been on the Board of Governors since 2013 as the 12th Circuit rep, and I'm running for President-elect of the Florida Bar. So first, I just want to thank everybody. I know the last year and a half, we keep using the word unprecedented, even though I guess it's our new normal. Thanks for all you do. I don't think the Board of Governors reaches out, let you know the committee work is such a big part of what we do. So thank you for everything. A little bit about myself. I've been a lawyer for 25 years. Grew up in Sarasota. I'm with the same law firm that I clerked at in law school. There's 9 of us, and I'm managing partner. Worked my way through the voluntary bars. I was Young Lawyers Division president here in Sarasota, then worked on the big board, as we call it, and then was president of the Sarasota County Bar. I was also serving on the Young Lawyers Division Board of Governors at the same time, eventually made it to the Board of Governors. My biggest job right now is I have a family with 2 small kids. I have a 15-month-old pandemic baby. He's healthy, but he born during the pandemic, and a daughter. So I understand some of the stresses and pressures we've been under the last year and a half, how our work-life balance has been blurred, if not obliterated by the pandemic. As we thought we were kind of coming to the light at the end of the tunnel, Delta came around and we were right back in it with virtual worlds. I think it's clear we're in transformational times. No matter what we get to when we get to the end of it, the practice of law is not going to look the same. We need to be here for each other, and the bar really needs to step up, I think, and be there for its members now more than ever. Some of the stuff that I've done on the board, I think that our board has different tiers of different committees. We have our standing committees. Everybody serves on different committees. Everybody serves on subcommittees, but only a few people can chair the big standing committees we have. And the last 4 presidents have appointed me and trusted me to chair those committees. I've chaired Communications Committee twice. I've chaired our Program Evaluation Committee, which is our committee that looks at all the program sections, looks at all the rules, bylaws. And I just finished chairing the Disciplinary Review Committee, which is our largest committee that regulates practice of law in Florida. I've won 2 President's Awards and just won an award with the Technology Committee this year. And I've been on exec from 2016 to 2021, elected and appointed. Since I've been on the board, the thing that I've really focused on is what can we do to give tools and resources to our members. I know contested election after contested election gets old for people to listen to, but I'll tell you, when I was sitting here, I would hear the buzzwords about being innovative, coming up with fresh ideas. This is what I want to do to change things. I always thought, what'd they do with their time on the board? So just a little bit of what I've done. I led the team that redid our website a few years ago. It was clunky. It was definitely something that was a little dated, to say the least. The find a lawyer function wasn't working. We tore it down. We started over again. So now the find a lawyer, you can actually find a lawyer on the front page. It's the central hub of what we do, whether it's COVID information, court closures, hurricane information. It's something that's a member benefit. You can find it all there. The next thing I did was led the team that created legalfuel.com. We put together a team from young lawyers, lawyers from other sections, try to put something together that everybody could use. If you haven't been there, please go. It's our practice management and technology website, has over 200 free hours of CLEs, forms, has podcasts, it has a career resource center. We know that technology transcends all practice areas. 70% of our lawyers are in small and solo law firms, and 16% are government lawyers. So we try to create something for everybody that everyone could use as a tool and resource. Obviously I wasn't smart enough to know that COVID was coming, but since COVID, that site has had a huge amount of hits. A lot of people have used it, and that's the idea. The newest thing we're working on that I pioneered was an IT helpline, free IT services for attorneys. You can log on, get free IT help, remote PC help. Obviously, we're in the virtual world and we're going to be here for a while, and I think it's here to stay. IT services are expensive and they're more important than ever. So we did a beta test that was very successful, and now we're going to make it a permanent member benefit for everybody. The March 2022 election is really about our members, in my opinion. We had only 18% of the members vote 2 years ago, and only 19% of the members vote last year. We really need to hear from you. I'd love to connect with you. I've taken up enough time. I have a website. It's electwestheimer.com, has my full bio. It has my full platform, over 900 endorsements, 24 past presidents, 23 past YLD presidents. And for the folks on the Board of Governors who we both work with that are taking a position, 75% are endorsing me. So I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear if you think there's things the bar can be doing better or differently. And I appreciate y'all's time. I'll put the info in the chat, and please reach out to me. Thanks, Matt, for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Scott.
I appreciate it.
All right. So is Lorna here with us and ready to give us a similar spiel? Emily, do you happen to know if she's logged in yet?
I am scrolling through the attendees. I don't see her at the moment.
Okay.
I don't believe she's here yet.
Okay. Well, she joins in. We'll give her the courtesy of presenting it towards the end, but I don't want to stall us out here too long. So real quick, I want to make sure that we have our main presenter here this morning with us, Brad Thoburn. I know we were having some technical issues earlier this morning. Let's see. I'm seeing that he has his video up and running, but Brad, are you having audio difficulties at the moment? Let's see, I see Brad there. Let's see, I see him up on the screen, but I don't see any audio coming through.
He's not muted, so
Yeah. Is your mic on your computer, Brad? Okay. Maybe quickly try logging off and logging back on, see if that jump starts it there for you.
if you click the up arrow in the mute unmute area, in the bottom left of your screen, it should give you alternate microphone options. I know I need to change mine.
Yeah.
Seemingly for no
We'll
reason
see.
sometimes.
Yeah, we'll see if when he logs back on, if that gets it there. Did you hear Emily, Brad, about clicking that arrow there on the mute button, giving you alternate options for speakers and mics? Any luck there, Brad?
Can you hear me now?
There we go. We're with you. All right. Perfect.
I just called in, so hopefully
Okay.
this works and we don't get any feedback. I apologize.
No, I appreciate you being able to work it out. And I also want to just let everyone know that Brad kindly jumped in here without too much of a heads up. We had some issues with getting some speakers lined up, and he jumped in at the recommendation of Bruce Humphrey. So I appreciate you doing this somewhat last minute. It's not entirely last minute. I looked at your PowerPoint presentation. It's very well put together. So I think it's going to be very informative. I just want to make sure, Emily, that Brad's going to be able to control the screen here so we can look at his PowerPoint. I don't know if you can give him that option, but once you
Yes.
do, perfect.
He should
So
have it.
perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking. I'm going to let Brad take over. After Brad finishes his presentation, we'll open it up to Q&A. I know Brad has a hard out at 10:30, so we won't be able to keep him past that, but I think that'll be just fine. So Brad, without any further ado, I'm going to let you take over.
Great, I appreciate it. Do I have control over the PowerPoint, or do I need to share screen?
You will need to share your screen, which you should be able
Alright.
to do, but if you prefer not, I can run it for you.
You got, okay, can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think I have too much stuff open. Everything's moving a little slow this morning.
I feel that.
Can you see the screen?
We can.
You can. Okay, so I'm not charged yet. Okay. All right, there we go. Well, I wanted to cover a couple things today. Just kind of give you a high-level overview of where we are from a policy perspective on transportation in the state of Florida. And as Matt mentioned, I kind of did come in at the last minute, so my presentation is sort of a compilation of a couple of them. So I'll try to make them tie together nicely. So I wanted to, obviously, want to kind of take a look at what some of the context is around transportation in Florida, and where we're heading. Obviously, from our perspective, safety and preservation are our first priorities. But there are a lot of emerging policy conversations that are developing around some key issues that I'll touch on today. Job creation. We're having a lot of conversation these days about things like supply chain resilience and so forth. But there are also some policy issues that are being discussed at the federal level that will impact us in the transportation industry. Things like equity, resilience, and climate change are all part of a broader conversation. So I want to start just with that context of what's happening that sort of affect our view of transportation from an economic standpoint. Obviously we're in a time where it's a little bit difficult to kind of gauge where we're heading in some ways, just because the pandemic created such a high level of just sort of a shock to the system. But Florida's unemployment rate dropped to 2.8% in January and February of 2020. And together with November of 29 was the lowest unemployment rate since we looked at that in 1979. So obviously we had a spike in April of 2020, and it really kind of pushed us past where we were even in 2010. But then in the span of a couple months, we did see that the rapid decrease back and to the point where we're back around 5% in 2021. We are obviously have a heavy dependence on tourism, and we get a lot of visitors to the state of Florida. That took a little bit of a dip in 2020, but we're seeing a rebound here as well. In Q2 of 2020, the Florida's visitors was 30% of what it was in 2019, just to give you a perspective. But it's almost been completely, that gap has almost been completely restored. So, when we look at things like the long-term growth, we do expect that we're going to kind of return to that normal. We're still lagging a little bit in visitors, but that's really coming back strong, as I mentioned. And then job growth is still a little bit below the forecast, and that forecast is dropped a little bit. But we see, kind of coming back to 2029, at least the growth is there, just a little bit below that previous projection. Some of the things, though, that we think about beyond, our growth is that we're facing a lot of new risks in the world, and I think, sometimes we talk about resiliency and we sort of think about immediately climate and sea level rise, things like that, which are obviously part of the resilience and the discussion about risk. But now, we obviously experienced a shock to the system with COVID, current supply chain disruptions and cyber attacks, things like that. And we started to see what the impacts are, especially, when we saw the Colonial Pipeline impact, how that can transfer into, impacts on our transportation system when there's a rush on fuel. I want to make a note, though. A lot of people, and we all saw the people heading to get fuel, and there was a little bit of a panic there. What people don't realize is 95% of the fuel in the state of Florida comes through our ports. So we weren't really at risk, but the panic does kind of set in, and you see the run on fuel. So these are some of the policy considerations that will drive us, and some of the things that the implications from a planning perspective is that we need to we're challenged to plan a little differently. We develop 20-year plans, and we update them every 5 years, and we do a 5-year work plan, and the world planning the world is changing so quickly with these emerging risks, new technologies, and things like that we have to be more nimble and agile, and it challenges our traditional planning work. I mentioned risk and resilience needs to be not only integrated in the planning process, but in the project development process. And then we always will have a great focus on job creation and economic stimulus, but as we kind of emerge from some challenges, it becomes even more important. And then from a transportation perspective, we're seeing much more interest in things like equity and access to opportunity. I mentioned safety as always a top priority for the department. as we look at where we've been, you know, we're still seeing an increase in fatalities. We've got a decrease in serious injuries. We were starting to see some improvement on that trend line, but I think, you know, we're concerned to see the number of serious fatalities go up, and we're also trying to get our head around what's the, you know, the impacts of travel changes during the pandemic. I think one of the things that I observed is that in some places, you know, we had less driving, so we had fewer accidents, but in some places, you know, we had less capacity, we had more capacity, excess capacity on the roads that sort of enabled some more risky driving, and in some places it increased some risk. So that's something as we go forward, we'll continue to look for strategies as we, you know, and it may be technology, it's design, it's driver behavior, it's enforcement, all those things. But you know, 90, I think a common statistic you'll hear is 94% of accidents are caused are by human error. Now, some of that's because of the context of the conditions where they're driving, but we do see technology having a great opportunity to improve safety on our roadways. But it doesn't mean we can ignore the other efforts to make our roads safer. We do not, you know, we talk about things like you know, managing speed, but how are the impacts on safety spread throughout our community, and how can we support alternatives to driving in a safe way? And then also we look at how do we, you know, because safety is not a program from a funding standpoint. So you really have to see how you can, you know, there are safety funds, but at the end of the day, it's really about integrating all these things into our projects as we go. And we're looking at things like improving our work zones. How do you impact drowsy driving, improving rail grade crossings, and then working with our partners in transit and even the private side with things like micro-mobility, and then how do we take advantage of connected and automated vehicles. Mobility obviously is you know, whenever we talk about transportation, we talk about mobility. Some of the things that we're seeing here is that we are, you know, we did see a drop in VMT in early 2020, but really back to 2019 levels and on a similar track there. And so, you know, we're kind of back to where we were. You see the blue line, and then where we see ourselves heading. And as it relates to VMT and population, our population, you can see our VMT is increasing just a little bit faster than population, so people are driving more. And I think one of the things that will be interesting is to see, you know, how our travel patterns change after COVID, and with things like telework. People may not be driving every day, but there's people may be living further out, and so it may change. Their VMT may continue to be at a similar level, but the travel patterns may be different, and so we need to respond to those things. So some of the implications for us are how we develop our corridors, how do we think about relieving congestion in urban areas, but then also how do we improve rural connectivity. Obviously, y'all are aware of the MCORS confrontation and Senate Bill 100, which sort of changed the conversation, but it also provided a focus on how do we upgrade arterial highways to potentially controlled access facilities in especially rural 2-lane to 4-lane facilities. We are looking at the impacts of transit and shared mobility, and transit took a hit in COVID, but they got a lot of money from the different relief bills, and they're trying to really figure out, you know, how do they get their ridership back, and then what does the world of transit look like in the future as people are maybe more inclined to use shared mobility solutions, and how do we integrate those as we move forward. And then also, are there opportunities to provide better first and last mile connections, and can contemplate really, you know, those connectivity between jobs and services. And I think one of the challenges, for those in a place like Jacksonville and many of our urban areas, we're seeing, migration of jobs into different places. So public transit has to kind of respond to that. It's easier when it's downtown, but if it's in a business park, it's important to figure out how do we provide access to those areas. Another area that will challenge us and give us great opportunity at the same time is innovation. And so, obviously, one of the areas of innovation that we see rapidly becoming sort of moving rapidly. And it's interesting, the conversation about EVs sort of was stronger in 10, 12 years ago, and then it kind of, you saw it sort of dissipate a little bit, and then it came back with a fury over the last couple of years, and really driven by a couple of things, but basically the private sector and development of battery technology, and so you're seeing a lot of the OEMs committing to conversion to fully electric fleets. GM is targeting 2035. Similarly, Volkswagen and Volvo have their similar plans. Truck manufacturers looking to end diesel truck sales by 2040. And so a lot of these, these aren't hard and fast. You see some of these things happening at state level too, where they're setting out goals to phase out the internal combustion engine. Essentially, what we see here is, we're still at a pretty low rate of adoption at 0.41%. It's gone up a little bit. We're actually not bad. I mean, the national rate is 1.9, but it's really skewed by California. So we're, in sheer numbers, we're actually second. So it sort of depends on how you look at it. But we are seeing, a move towards electric vehicles, the industry moving that way, and then some of the key challenges as it relates to that are range and range anxiety, and how do you create the network of charging stations. And we're seeing we expect to have some federal funding in that area. We developed the EV master plan that would figure address issues like how do you address the gaps in the network, but then also the evacuation scenarios and how what are the implications in an emergency scenario, and the issues that we can kind of help address those challenges that will come about. Additionally, I mentioned earlier telework and sort of changing work expectations, and so another issue that's gaining a lot of attention is the access to broadband. You can see it's obviously an urban and rural disparity there. And so I think as we look at the federal transportation bill and state investments, we'll be looking at how do you bridge that gap as access to broadband becomes an important infrastructure issue. So again, I just kind of list out some of these policy implications. EV infrastructure is one, but also, just how do we deal with the new mobility solutions, whether it's not automated vehicles or the air taxis and urban air mobility, things like that. We're seeing, we're working with Brightline on developing high-speed rail between Miami, Orlando, Tampa. The nature of our transportation system is clearly changing, and one of the things that obviously EV raises is the question of funding, as a good portion of our gas our funding is through gas taxes, and so obviously the electric vehicles do not provide that, and so there will be a funding conversation that goes forward in that regard. I'll talk a little bit about the federal bill in a minute, but there are obviously a lot of different, there's conversations about alternatives to motor fuel taxes. There are some pilots that are happening. Oh, you know, what's really important is whatever the solution is, it can't be a sort of a state by state fragmented solution, because especially for Florida, where we're so dependent on our economy is dependent on visitors. And so if it's something like a registration fee, that doesn't quite capture folks coming into the state. So you got to think about how our system is connected. There's going to continue to be a focus on public-private partnerships. I mentioned Brightline, where that's a scenario where we're simply leasing land to Brightline, and it is a privately funded inner city rail initiative. P3s aren't funding, but they are ways to leverage financing, shift risk, and foster innovation through partnerships with the private side. And I think you're also going to see more state and local partnerships and partnerships with our modes, because a lot of the funding we're going to see from the federal level is going to be, it's not going to just flow through the state, and it's going to drive us towards really doing a better job of working with our partners. And we think about a multimodal network. The department is directly involved in running, in building roads and maintaining roads. But on the modal side, whether it's our airports, seaports, transit agency, we're usually just a funding partner, or we're providing technical assistance, maybe safety oversight, but we're not the operator or maintainer of those. And so as we see a much more integrated multimodal system, that partnership is going to be important. And then I also mentioned before the need to be more agile, flexible, as our traditional planning timelines are challenged. We deal, one of the things I haven't talked about is space. We actually do a lot working with Space Florida and funding infrastructure to support commercial space development. And it's an exciting opportunity. Obviously, everybody got the attention of William Shatner the other day, but there's so much going on there. And that's, if you talk to the folks in the world of commercial space development and you ask them what they want to do in 5 years, they kind of laugh at you, because they're just, they've got an idea, but they don't have a 5-year work program. And so, those kind of things will challenge us going forward. So I wanted to share a little bit about the Florida Transportation Plan and the SIS. What I just gave you there was really context for the Florida Transportation Plan and our Strategic Intermodal System Plan. Whenever I talk about the Florida Transportation Plan, it is literally a strategic transportation plan for the entire state. It's not the department's plan. It is a long-range plan that drives policy and helps guide how we partner and how we prioritize our investments. We work with a whole host of folks in doing. Now the FTP is updated every 5 years, and so, but it never sits on the shelf. We work with our partners to develop that. You can see this is just a quick shot of some of the bigger partners we work with, and we have a SIS steering committee that we kind of joke they're like the Hotel California. They can check out, but they can never leave. We make them stick around for different portions of developing the plan, the implementation plan, the monitoring plan, and then integration with our other planning efforts. So it's kind of interesting how that works. There's a couple different pieces of the FTP. We have a vision element, and that provides that long-term view on key trends. Some of that which I already covered earlier, but it creates the vision for the future system. We have a handful of goals here. There's really kind of 3 core goals that you kind of, or excuse me, there's actually sorry about that. There's a handful that sort of are recurring goals: safety, infrastructure, mobility, and accessibility. But then we're also integrating other things like economic impact, communities, and environment. These are all interrelated, and I think if you look at as the FTP has evolved through the years, things that are really driving or changing the way we think about transportation or emerging technologies and some of the trends I mentioned earlier. Policy elements, again, this is it's like a strategic plan with your objectives, your key indicators, strategies, and the key thing is these strategies. These are really guiding us going forward. We've got 3 foundational strategies of where we think about things like how do we make sound investments, how do we sustain funding, and how do we maintain a skilled workforce, which I think we talk about some of the challenges with supply chains, et cetera. We're seeing that that's a big piece of it. And all of our transportation partners are challenged in the workforce area, whether it's getting bus drivers or truck operators, or just kind of, the world of transportation is so different that it's not just getting, your best and brightest engineers. It's a lot more than that. If you see the key strategies, these are kind of aligned to the foundational strategies, talking about safety, how do we looking at how we plan differently for our corridors, how do we mitigate risks, leveraging technology, moving people and freight, and then also things like tying our land use decisions with our transportation planning. And so these aren't earth shattering, but they're important. They're sort of foundational and they drive our decision making. One of the key things, as I mentioned, is the emerging technology, and so this covers everything from broadband to electric vehicle charging stations, roadside sensors, pavements for automated and connected vehicles, things like predictive analytics, which are really going to be an interesting opportunity moving forward. We have access to so much data, and that we're able to actually, in some cases, evaluate conditions in real time that tell us when we're sort of reaching a place where, for example, the conditions are more conducive to accidents. And so it may change the way we do operate, position road rangers or work with Florida Highway Patrol. Maybe we manage it proactively and real-time manage signals and things like that. So I think it's really exciting as we look to the future. This info structure piece is really going to be a big deal. Moving on to the element of implementation, we're actually doing this right now, and so we finished the actual policy plan when I came on. So I kind of came in midstream on this, but this is going to have obviously a great focus on collaboration, customer experience, how we develop and leverage data, and then working with our partners at the local and regional level. So and that's the implementation plan, which again and I'm going to talk about the SIS here in a minute, and how it ties into the FTP, but we definitely have an optimistic view of the future of transportation as we look to figure out how we can move towards zero fatalities, how can we provide faster travel times, not necessarily people moving faster, but doing that through congestion relief, reliability, and things like that, and also technology, and also meeting the needs of all users, providing flexibility in our programs so that we can adapt and be more resilient, and then staying ahead of the curve in terms of emerging mobility solutions. So it's really exciting and challenging from a planning standpoint. So you can get access to the FTP online and by going to www.floridatransportationplan.com. I encourage you to take a look, and there is opportunity to comment on these plans. So one of the key elements of our work at the department, especially from the central office view, is the SIS plan. And so what we do is we once we get the FTP done, one of the key things that follows up on that is we update the SIS policy plan. So the SIS is a strategic intermodal system plan. And I think it's important to understand how the SIS is, what the SIS really is all about. First of all, the department we have central office in Tallahassee, but then we have 7 districts and the Turnpike and also the Florida Rail Enterprise. And a lot of the funding is allocated to districts. The prioritizations come up through the districts, through the MPOs and local governments, as it should. But the SIS is intended to ensure that we have a view of our statewide system and that we have interconnectivity and that we're making strategic investments in our most critical transportation facilities. So what the SIS does is it limits what facilities are on the SIS through eligibility criteria, and then we take a statewide view of how we invest those funds. So we actually have statewide managed funds, we have district managed funds. And so what that lets us do is not be constrained by sort of a funding formula for each district. And we can do big projects that a lot of other states struggle with because they're kind of so focused on equity. Now we take a view of equity under the SIS, like we just kind of take the long view and say, okay, we know that if it's District 7 right now, like we're going to do the West Shore interchange. If we had to wait for West Shore to be done through district allocation and district formula, it would be very complex and difficult, and it would take a long time. But we're able to kind of focus on things like that. Okay, let's get that big project done. We're going to do the I-4 Ultimate, Port of Miami Tunnel, things like that. So it lets us get the big projects done and then make sure that our overall network is connected. As we go through the SIS policy plan, we actually have a couple of different pieces to that. We have a needs assessment. We look at the prioritization. We map the facilities. We develop a finance plan, and then we'll do through this process is assess the impact of proposed improvements to SIS corridors on military facilities, for example, and so forth. So this, I don't want to get into too much of the nuances here, but as we look forward and updating the SIS plan, again, you know, the Florida FTP is sort of that broader view of the strategic plan for the state and all partners, but the SIS is the strategic plan for the strategic intermodal system. So it's a little more narrowly focused. We started earlier this year in the update. We're going to be done in early 2022. We're kind of putting together the pieces of it right now, and we're going to do some outreach and engagement. It'll give a chance for anybody, including this group, to provide feedback on it. So we are going to align the SIS with some of the vital few priorities of the department, which include safety, mobility, and innovation. If we so the SIS policy plan will define how we plan and manage SIS. It will help us, feed the 5-year plan and the long-range needs plan, and ultimately leads to the programming and funding. And I'm just going to kind of jump to there's 3 sort of critical areas that we're looking at in the SIS policy plan update this time. And one is kind of how we define capacity. And we're going to become a little more flexible in that regard. So that will, I think, challenge us to look at things like technology and TSM&O, or transportation system management and operations, connected automated vehicle technology. And so it's really about how do we leverage the existing infrastructure that we have in place, and also think a little bit differently about just moving cars and trucks to be focused on moving people and freight, which is a little bit of a nuance, but it's important because it may give a little bit more focus on things like transit in areas that are more urbanized. And it'll challenge us to think differently about how we define mobility. And so the other thing is, when we think about capacity, we may look at things like resilience as well, because if our system's not resilient, it ultimately exposes it to risk, which affects reliability and ultimately mobility. The other thing is flexibility. The SIS, when it was developed 20 years ago, in 2002, was the idea was we wanted to be a truly multimodal system. And we got part way there, but it's still really heavily road focused. But we made some really great investments in our modal with our modal partners, especially in seaports and rail and airports, and now spaceports as well, and our transit partners. But we are probably going to need to be a little bit more flexible as we go forward and think about how we may even make some investments off system that help relieve congestion on system. How do we do, maybe fund some more quick fix projects with sys connectors, and so all of this will affect how we prioritize and select eligible corridors, eligible facilities, and how we prioritize our funding. And one of the things we think about is that, in some areas, we're just so diverse. South Florida is very different from even Central Florida and North Florida and the Panhandle, and their needs are all different in each area. And we need a system that kind of is able to reflect the changing needs in each one of these communities. As in some places, you're getting a point of diminishing return on widening the interstate. So we need to think differently than that. And so those will be some of the challenges going forward. And then when we talk about things like interregional, there is a question about how we define interregional. And I don't want to get into the nuances of this, but it really gets to this question of how strategic are our investments. And we've been challenged to think a little bit differently about how we define interregional. But my guess is there's some folks that want to see it be very watered down, and the interregional could be between two different really high density urbanized centers within a county. And we're like, well, we're not quite going there, but it may be a little less strict than what we have today. But we have to sort of thread the needle on these things like flexibility and defining interregional so that we continue to have truly strategic investments through the SIP. The last thing I wanted to do is kind of give you a quick update of where we stand on the federal side. I don't have slides on this because I figure the moment I create slides on the federal update, it'll change anyway. Although it doesn't seem like things are moving too fast right now. What our view is, the infrastructure, the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that passed the Senate is probably going to be close to whatever is finally adopted. So I'm not good at kind of reading the tea leaves in terms of how they're going to resolve things at the federal and at the congressional level between the House and the Senate and progressives, moderates, and conservatives. But I think we kind of work off the assumption that there will be a bill. It's just maybe a question of when, and what we get is probably going to look pretty close to what's in the Senate. Obviously, what's important here is that the bill that passed the Senate is a reauthorization of the Federal Transportation Act. So now we are moving into that point where our funding is being provided at the federal level through short-term extensions. Now, good news is we rely a little less on federal funds than some other states, but it's still, it's not a good way to do business at the end of the day. Working off of 30-day and 3-month extensions is not conducive to building a robust transportation plan. So as we look at the federal bill, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, the overall bill, talk about the $1.1 billion, $1.2 billion, about half of it's a transportation bill, but also includes investments in water, power, environmental remediation, public lands, broadband, and resiliency. We expect about, based on the formula, we get about $16.7 billion in transportation funds. Sometimes we use 16.3, but if you include some of the other, like the resiliency funding and the formula funds that we expect to get for EVs, kind of bumps it up. About, difference is about, in those formula funds, about $600 million more than we get under the FAST Act. In fact, I think we would get, I'm sorry, so the 16.7 is for all our partners. That's not just DOT. 13, that we would get 13.8 at FDOT. And that's, you know, it's about 38% more than under the FAST Act. One of the things that is an issue for us that we are a little bit concerned about, we moved past that point of being a donor state, but there's some things in here that could push us back in the wrong direction in terms of equity. One is the bridge formula program where, you know, our share of that would be about less than 1%. We should be getting about 4% of any formula program. And the reason we get so little under that is because it's based on how poor the condition of your bridges. So we're actually penalized for keeping our bridges in good shape. And that's a pretty significant hit to us. You know, we get, again, about 25% of what we should. And that's about $200 million impact a year from an equity standpoint. In addition, they're going to have a host of discretionary programs like the Bridge Investment Program. There's going to be sort of some combination of formula and discretionary competitive grants for EVs and resiliency. So we'll get some formula funds, but then we're going to have to compete for the other funds. And we think about, you know, we're probably going to be disadvantaged on the bridge discretionary program, just like we are with the formula program. And then there's $65 billion in broadband infrastructure. There's like $66 billion in passenger rail investment. Some of that could be discretionary funding that we could compete for. We always are fighting this equity battle, even though we've done great work over the past couple of reauthorizations. One of the things we see is that, you know, they were using 2000 census data for most of it. We're moving up to 2010 for some programs and 2020 for others. It would make a lot of sense for, you know, given our growth, that we would be using 2020. Some of the policy issues that you're going to see in that bill are focused on safety, equity, climate. There will be some additional pilots on the motor vehicle use fee, the mobility-based use fee, where, you know, kind of an alternate to the gas tax. But there have been a lot of those going on already. So, you know, from a Florida standpoint, we kind of sit back and watch those pilots with interest. We haven't done any on our own and don't plan to, but largely because there's enough out there that we can learn from the things that are going on. There are just a bunch of, I mean, one of the things that will be interesting is there's about 10% of the bill is discretionary grants. And it was, I think, 2% under the FAST Act. So that's going to put a huge burden on the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway, and FTA and other agencies to really ramp up. And they have a tough time sometimes getting their grant programs out. And so it'll be interesting to see how quick some of these dollars get to actually getting deployed. So again, that'll be something that will force us all to work more closely with our partners. And I think, you know, the DOT in many cases will not be the preferred applicant, especially when you look at the makeup of the leadership at the DOT. You know, Secretary Buttigieg is very much a local government guy, and there was some talk at one point that more of the funds in this bill would go directly to local governments and regional entities. I think they figured out that was not a really practical approach. I think that we kind of expect a preference being given to locals in some of these discretionary programs. And as you know, especially in your space, some of the rules around federal transportation can be quite challenging. It's important that you have recipients that actually know how to meet the regulations and requirements associated with federal transportation spending. So I think what we're going to see going forward is us working very closely with our modal partners, our state, our county and local governments, regional entities to compete for funding. Always like to end with a reminder on safety, and you know, one is too many. I mentioned earlier that 94% of injuries and crashes are related to human error. But there's this is not just a case of getting the steering wheel out of the vehicle and having automated vehicles and making sure that people drive smarter and safer. That's part of it. But there are things that we can do across the board in terms of making our system safer. So the department is committed to doing that on our own and also working with our partners to make that happen. With that, I am available for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Brad. So does anyone have any questions for Brad here? I've got a few of my own, but I'll let you guys take first crack at it if you'd like to.
Hey, this is Charlie Stratton. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can hear you.
yeah, I frequently drive from Tallahassee to South Florida and back. And actually, I went down day before yesterday and came back yesterday. And both on the way down and the way back, there were serious delays on the stretch between Wildwood and Lake City. It seems like it happens every time I drive that stretch in one direction or the other. Does the department keep statistics on that? And other than the connection from Wildwood over to the Suncoast extension, if that ever happens, are there any plans to do anything about it? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd have to. I don't know the specifics on where we stand on the work program with some of those improvements, but yeah, we are. I mean, that's how we when we're doing our planning. We're looking at obviously travel demand, future forecasts, but then also, to the extent some of those delays may be related to operations. Can we clear accidents faster? Can we make near-term operational improvements? And so, part of it's widening roads. What we do, we're also doing the I-75, I-4 frame projects, which are putting in additional sensors and roadside units to better monitor in real time some of the things that are happening on those corridors, to figure out how we can better respond to them. Short of an infrastructure investment of widening the road. So, obviously those kind of solutions take a lot longer. So we're always looking at ways we can do things near term, whether it's short-term fix, safety improvement, or operational.
Thank you.
Charlie, anyone else? I'll go ahead and ask one of mine here. So I guess we'll just start kind of simple. There's kind of a more practical one, a little bit higher level one. I guess just for the practical one, do you have, and I know you guys were talking about having to wait till the federal, you're waiting on some federal stuff to pass and things like that, but are you privy to any FDOT priority projects here this year and the next 2 years or so?
Yeah, we are in the process of locking down our work program, so you'll see some of those come out shortly. We have, one of the things that we were able to do more recently was with the ARPA funds, there was $2 billion allocated to transportation. Now that actually got reduced a little bit because the formula was off a little bit in terms of what we expected. We allocated $250 million of that to our ports, because they really, if you looked at all of the relief bills, our ports got completely excluded from everything, and our cruise ports were just, they obviously got hit pretty hard. So we were able to provide some relief to our ports based on, their impact. So it wasn't just crews, but it was based on their economic impact and lost revenue. So the cruise terminals actually got a lot of that funding, but that left, kind of $1.5 billion plus or minus for road projects. And what we've been able to do with that is sort of accelerate some big projects. There's a lot of smaller safety things that, because we wanted to, these are things we got to push into the first year or two of the work program. So that's where you're seeing stuff like West Shore and Southwest 10th Street. We've got projects all over the state that are popping out as part of that process. And then it creates a little bit of a backfill opportunity on, the fourth, fifth year of the work program. Obviously, we do the normal backfill, what we would do anyway with the new fifth year. But because we've kind of moved up some projects, there's some other opportunities. I can't really talk about the projects right now because we haven't locked that down yet. But it's really positive. We continue to have over a $10 million work program budget and a work program that's really robust and it's letting us get some big projects done.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I'll just go ahead and ask my second question here because it kind of ties into it. So I know for years, at least in the Orlando area, and I know this is true for some of the other urban areas throughout the state, this overall transportation strategy has been basically the Beltway idea, to where we need to be able to get folks in from the suburbs into more of the proper urban area for work and things like that. As the virtual trend has been accelerated throughout the whole COVID time, has DOT put any consideration into what that is going to do to affect their overall strategy? Is the thought process still we need to focus on getting folks from the suburbs into the city area to work and then back to the suburbs to sleep and live their lives? Or is FDOT anticipating a change in the needs of Florida drivers in that regard?
That's a really good question, and it's one that it's challenging us because whenever you have an impact like we saw with COVID, where it really changed travel patterns, changed the way people work, you have to figure out what's going to stick, and I don't know that we totally know that yet, and so we're obviously monitoring that, and then we're thinking about how do we pivot if we need to, how do we maybe rethink priorities if one of the things I kind of wonder about is if you're working 1 or 2 days a week in the office, we've traditionally had this spread of moving to suburbs and moving further and further out. We've had efforts to try to mode infill and support urban mobility solutions and boost transit in our urban centers. But then you think it may even force a leapfrog development where somebody says, I could live even further out. And one of the observations I have about Florida is that we have a lot of really interesting cities that are in kind of rural areas that are that you wouldn't think about living in and working in another larger city, but you might today think, gee, I could live in Palatka and work in the south side of Jacksonville or Lake City or DeLand or a place like Bartow and other, they all become, it's like, how does that affect? And so we are looking at that, and we'll monitor the trends. The state has folks that are always looking at the economic trends, the development trends, and thinking about how does that affect the way we plan for transportation. The challenge is, we don't want to just overreact to something we saw that we don't know is going to stick. And so that's where we kind of sit right now, is trying to figure out what's the real long-term answer going to be.
Great, thank you. Well, that does it for my questions. Does anyone else have any other questions for Brad? Okay, Hearing none, I want to thank you again, Brad, for coming. We'll get you out of here a little bit early. I know, you said you had to get out of here by 10:30, so we'll get you out well ahead of that. Appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I know I enjoyed it. It was informative. And then, so thank you, Brad. And then everyone, before we head out here, we do actually have, Emily tells me that we have Lorna Brown Burton on joining us. She's the other candidate I spoke about who's running for the president-elect of the Florida Bar. So if she's still available, we'll go ahead and give her the courtesy of speaking to us and having some time there. Lorna, are you still with us?
Hi there, can you, here you go. Can you see me? Yeah.
Ma'am.
All right, thank you very much, Chair. And hello, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to give a few remarks to you this morning during your meeting. As said by your chair, my name is Lorna Brown Burton, and I'm a candidate for Florida Bar President-elect. First, let me say thank you all for the work you do on behalf of the Eminent Domain Committee and for the Florida Bar. I don't think we get to say that enough. So again, Lorna Brown Burton, this campaign for me is about all Florida Bar attorneys and what the Florida Bar can do for you, all members of the Florida Bar. That's been who I have been since day one as a young lawyer till today as a senior lawyer and on the Florida Bar Board of Governors. It's been about the Florida Bar members and of what the Florida Bar can provide its members. And as the Eminent Domain Committee as well as all sections, committees, and voluntary bars, I thank you again for the work you do on behalf of the Florida Bar. You all are the heart and soul of the Florida Bar, as well as the visionaries and innovators, and I truly believe that together we can propel the Florida Bar forward. This is also about reimagining the possibilities of the practice of law and being focused on our promising future. And while that's also been the backbone of who I am, I think it's so apropos inside of our challenges with COVID, and I am the leader to bring us forward. I am a 34-year practicing, working litigator and a Florida Bar 17th Circuit representative on the Board of Governors since 2012, when I succeeded then President-elect Eugene Pettis, a great friend since undergraduate at University of Florida, a former law partner and endorser of my campaign. I also, while serving as Young Lawyers Section President of the Broward Bar, I also served on the Young Lawyers Division from the mid to late 1990s to the early 2000s. I've worked in firms of various sizes, and I'm also proud of the fact that I owned and operated my own firm for 14 years of my 34 years. So I know and understand the needs and resources of all firms, to include the solo small firm, which makes up 70% of our bar, to be a success. However, also included in my platform, in my plan, are government lawyers, which makes up 16 to 20% to bring them inside the fold of the Florida Bar. I have over 25 years of leadership experience as president, chair, and executive committee, to include serving on the bar's executive committee, for which I was elected by my peers, as well as in those same capacities in local and state boards. I'm also proud of the fact that I was Citizens Advisory Committee Chair, which is a committee very critical to the work that we do on the Florida Bar Board of Governors, where when I started as chair, they were not fully performing the objective and mission for which they were formed. And when I completed as chair, they were fully performing that mission, which is still ongoing till today. I was tapped by past President Michael Heiger, who is also endorsing my campaign, to be the overall chair of his implementation strategic plan priorities during his term, as well as overall chair of the Judicial Nomination Selection Committee, where in that year we had the highest number of applicants who wanted to serve on the JNC, as well as chaired the Bar's Committee on developing a succession plan for the Bar's executive director. I've served on almost all of the Florida Bar Board of Governors committees. And so I know the full workings of the bar, and I'm ready to lead the bar forward. Over 30 years of voluntary bar experience at local and state level, over 20 years of voluntary community, nonprofit, and civic board experience. And also what I'm proud of is that I was chair of the Broward Legal Aid and was instrumental in starting their For the Public Good fundraiser, which continues today and for which I'm still a part of. So I'm an experienced, proven servant leader, ready to lead from day one. I won't go into all of my platform, but as I said, we're in transformational time with COVID, and who could have foreseen that? And we had to pivot. And while we did a great job, I still understand what it took for us to continue our work as a caregiver for my 94-year-old dad, as well as having friends and colleagues, our attorneys with small children, and having to merge home and work. So I got the impact on our quality of life, and I know and understand the stressors, and I'm ready to tackle these challenges, which will call for innovation and adaptation. And I am the leader that will bring us forward. Persistence is who I am. I don't let obstacles get in the way, as I see them as challenges with solutions, and I'm here to empower your work. All members of the Florida Bar work with the means and resources. Professionalism is also at the top of my platform, which you know is our current president, Tanner's, one of his platforms as well. So I'm a servant leader who invests the time and energy on the court with the team, playing full out with the success of the entire team. It's not about me, accolades. This is not a popularity contest. Friends, this is about the members of the Florida Bar and making sure that the Florida Bar members, yourself, are provided with the necessary and adequate resources to facilitate the growth and enhancement of your business and daily practice while continuing to ensure your physical and mental well-being. So please do check out my website. It's selectlorna.com. I am forward-thinking and solution-driven, and those are not just words. That's truly who I am, and the time is now for a leader like me. So please do check out my website, my platform, electlorna.com. I want to hear from you. This is about you in March of 2022. It will be about you, the Florida Bar members. And so I ask for your vote, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me to say a few words. I'll also put my information in the chat before I go. Thank you again.
Thank you, Lorna. I appreciate it. All right, everyone. I think with that, just a few more housekeeping items before we let you go here a bit early. We, of course, will be sending out the CLE information after this course wraps up, like we've done in the past. So keep an eye out on your inboxes for that. We'll also be sending you a PDF of today's presentation in case you want to reference anything back. As always, myself and the vice chairs are available to take any questions or concerns you guys have. All of our contact information is on the Eminent Domain Committee portal on the Florida Bar website, so feel free to reach out to us. Emily, thank you for jumping in. I know our regular staff liaison, Sheridan, had to cover another one, so there's a bit of a shuffle, so I appreciate that. Emily, am I forgetting anything, or are we good to go with housekeeping?
We are good to go. Just one more note on the CLE. This will be a self-reported credit. So once you get the course number in your email, be sure to go into the member portal and self-report that credit.
Perfect. Thank you. Good reminder. All right, everyone. Well, I thank you for coming out and participating virtually here on our fall meeting. Again, I know we've said this over the last few meetings, but we're hoping in spring we'll get to be back together. I know I personally have missed the in-person interaction with this committee. But we'll keep you guys posted on that. In the meantime, everyone stay safe.
Matt.
Yep.
Matt, this is Don Workman. I just wanted to introduce myself again. I'm the Board of Governor liaison, your new liaison. And
okay, great.
You can reach me through the board if there are any questions or issues or concerns for anybody has. Please reach out to me.
Great. Thank you so much, Don, for interrupting me there. I didn't see that on the agenda, so I appreciate you jumping in there. All right.
No worries.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see each other in the spring. Thank y'all.
Good to see everybody.